Hi, my name is Kristen Gleason and I'm a third grade teacher. I'm so excited to share with you all about science as inquiry. You might be asking yourself, what is science inquiry? Well, let me tell you about it. I like to think of science inquiry as a process. The first part of the process is asking questions. So students need to come up with their own hypothesis that they want to figure out. The next part of the process would be experimenting. So the students are hands-on experimenting. The third part of the process is observation. So they are looking and seeing what other people are doing. The fourth part of the process is sharing. So they're sharing their results with everyone else. In the past, science has been very serious. Instead of being so serious, I'm going to focus on telling a story and making the information important to your student. I believe that science inquiry is important to the field of science because our students need to be able to do those 4 steps in order to be good scientists. This teaches them how to be a scientist and how to figure out problems that they don't understand. It not only helps them with science, but it helps them in their daily life. This is a really great handout that I found for parents. I think it's really important for parents to know what I'm going to be doing with your student in an inquiry classroom. I'm going to be learning right along with the students. It's really important that I show the students that they can learn, but I can also learn too. It's also important for me to be aware of the students' prior knowledge and know how to use that knowledge to spring them forward. Finally, I will be modeling approaches for students to use, so that way they have something to go off of. It is so important for me to give the students time to think before asking them to respond. It will be normal in our classroom to have at least a minute or 2 for students to think about what they want to share, instead of me asking a question and calling on the first person to raise their hand. I think this graphic is great for sharing with parents. It shows that every student is going to have a different question and a different hypothesis, but they're all going to be studying the same event. So they're really taking ownership over their experiment. It belongs to them, and they're going to be excited about the results, and also they're going to be able to communicate their own results with their group. I also really like this graphic to share with parents. It shows that the different parts of the science inquiry process goes in a circle. So their student will always be learning, but they will always be coming to an end result to share with others. I want your student to know that no matter how good or bad they think they are at science, I have confidence in them and they can figure anything. I found a really great article written by Andrea Mueller that discusses some spaces that students can have during science time. They call them spaces of inquiry. And as she puts them, there's a space for brainstorming and collaboration, a rehearsal space for presentation of ideas, and a performing space as the presentation is finished. So I thought this article was a really great way for students to practice science inquiry in the classroom and also to kind of do it as centers in the classroom and to have those different spaces. This way students could work at their own pace and as they finish each station, they could just move on to the next station. I also found this really great article written by Keyes and Bryan. They were quoted as saying that inquiry in science is the central strategy for teaching science. I thought that this was a really important quote, and it really helped me to understand how important science inquiry is in the classroom. These authors also state how important it is to implement science inquiry in our schools. It's so important to do this so that we can continue to teach these students how to research. This is a hands-on example of an experiment that I did with my students in a 3rd grade classroom. The students were learning about force and motion. The first step of science inquiry is to have a hypothesis. So my students decided what they thought would make a car go faster: a ramp on 1 book, 2 books, or 3 books. I had my students work in small groups so that they could get the most out of this experiment. What you're watching is the trial run of one of my groups. First, they experimented with one book. Now they're experimenting with 2 books. And finally, they will experiment with 3 books to see how far their car can go. At this point in the science inquiry process, my students are observing. They are looking at their results that they shared with their group and talking about the different things that happened with their cars and their different ramps. The final step of the inquiry process is sharing. The next video clip shows one of my students sharing her results with the force and motion experiment. And what happened in your last trial?
The third one was like the one that went least far, and then the second one was the farthest, and then the first one was went farther than the third one.
This is a photo of another hands-on activity that we have done in our classroom regarding science. This activity was all about static electricity. Students first had to make their hypothesis on what would happen if we rub a balloon on someone's head and then try to pick up packing peanuts. Students had many different hypotheses, as some thought that nothing would happen and some thought that the balloon would just fill up with the peanuts. In the next step of the inquiry process, which was actually doing the activity, students were very excited to see the results of what actually happens when you rub this balloon on your head. In the observation process of this activity, students wrote down and observed how many packing peanuts their peers could pick up with one balloon. Finally, we shared the results with our class and also with our principal, who is pictured. The next 3 examples that I'm going to share with you are examples from our science curriculum that we have at our school. This first example was something that I found in the book about an experiment to do about changing environments. I felt that this experiment was really not the best for my students. It asks the students to plan and conduct an experiment to find out how plants are affected if the lake dries up. I felt that this experiment would not be beneficial towards my students because most of them do not live near a lake. I think to make this a better experiment, there are many things that we need to do. I would definitely give my students more direction when it comes to this experiment. We would plant 2 plants per child. One plant we would not water, and the other plant we would continuously water. This would show the students that watering the plants would keep it alive, while not watering the plants would have it dry up and the plant would die. I really liked this experiment that was in our science curriculum. I really liked that it had the students recording their observations so frequently. However, I would change the very beginning and have the students write their hypothesis before doing anything else. I really feel like this experiment would give students a lot of time to observe while doing the experiment. This would really help the students to understand the concept. As you can see, science's inquiry is very important to me, and I will be implementing inquiry into my science lessons as well as other lessons in the classroom. I think it's really important for students to be able to choose what they want to do and also to continue their learning based on their choices. I think science inquiry is so important, and I'm so excited to be doing this with your student.